So much to cover. I'm going to turn the time right over to you two.
Do you, can you see that we're recording?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad you can. Okay,
Thanks, Janie.
Stacy, you can start anytime.
Oh, okay. Well, I just am grateful that you guys are here and that you're going to share this, these complicated bits of information with us and get us updated on what the latest is. I know my head spins trying to keep up with all the grants and loans and economic relief that's available to us. So I can imagine somebody running a business is also having their head spin with a lot of this information. So Janie and Steve, thank you for being our guests today from our Seattle SBA office. And in the chat, there's a contact for the SBA Portland office, which would be the one we would work out of. But they were gracious enough to step on here and help us out. I'm going to turn the time over to them immediately because they have a lot of information to cover.
Well, thanks, Stacy. It's great to be with everybody. You're right. This is increasingly complicated stuff that, be honest with you, Janie and I spend hours every week just getting updated on what's more current. So we're going to cover what we think we know about most of this stuff today, but I would encourage you, if you've got questions, to place your questions in the chat. We are recording this. We'll get the recording to Stacy as well as the slide deck so that you can utilize it with other people that you may be working with, other people that part of your organization that may not be on today. So we are going to cover some detail, and there'll be some detail in the recording that's not in the slide deck per se written down, because we're going to fill you in on those things as we go through them. So we're going to talk about PPP applications, touch on loan forgiveness, the shuttered venue operator grant, the restaurant revitalization, targeted ILA advance, the EIDL program itself as well. So we'll try and give you some differences as to each of those as we go through it. One of the things that's very interesting that we've been tracking on a weekly basis is how Washington State is doing relative to the PPP program. And as of just this last Sunday, we were at $5.5 billion. We were hoping to get to $6 billion. Not sure that that's going to happen, but in terms of just Washington State, that's a lot of money going into our small businesses in the PPP program. 77,000 total loans. We're still the 12th most nationwide by state in dollars. Nationwide, it's 248 billion and over 5 million loans. But one of the really interesting things that I think probably very much applies to the more rural communities, possibly like yours, is the loan size by numbers. For 2021, 83, almost 84% of all of the loans have been $50,000 or less. And we'll touch on that a little bit, because that means that those that are seeking loan forgiveness, nearly 84% are going to be utilizing for loan forgiveness a 3508S short form, which we'll just briefly cover today. And so a small percentage then, 16% are going to be utilizing the longer forms, one of the longer forms, a 3508EZ or the long form 3508. So this is program, which was a primary effort this year, was pushing this PPP down to the smaller businesses to whom $50,000 or less makes a real difference in terms of their long-term survival, which is our primary goal. So overall, nationwide, the average loan sizes started out at over $80,000 in January of this year and has dropped down to $48,000 so far. And so this demonstrates how that works and what the status is to date. um, and reiterates the difference here between those that are in the first draw, which, just for terminology's sake, a first draw was one of those things that is now the label for any PPP in 2020, as well as the first draw in 2021. And then there's a second draw so that people can get an additional one. You can only get one first draw and one second draw. And so the second draws are only 2021. And this kind of identifies the breakdown of the difference of those. So what are all the programs? And we're going to just touch on all of these today. The Paycheck Protection Program, as you may know. There was also a debt relief program where those people that had existing SBA 7A, 504, and microloans, the SBA was and U.S. Treasury was covering the payments on those for several months in 2020 and 2 or 3 months here in 2021. That program has ended, and so people with those loans did get a break. Hopefully we're able to save a little bit of money from that to be able to continue paying on those loans from I think it was the end of March on when that expired. Then there's the economic injury disaster loan that is still active. Janie's going to cover that here a little bit later on. And then there's the targeted idle advance, which is essentially a grant. And although we are hesitant to use the word grant on everything, as you'll hear, but the targeted idle advance is a direct payment to people in some hard-hit communities. And then there's the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. We'll talk just briefly about that. That program is up and running. And then starting next week, opening up this coming Monday, is the new Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which is also a direct payment. So we've got this information as current as we can as of today, but you should know that neither Janie nor myself are the final authority on this material. Our role is really just to stay updated on the legislation, the SBA FAQs, the interim final rules, the procedural notices, and any updates. And there's 3 federal agencies that are involved in this. That's the U.S. Treasury, the Small Business Administration, and even the Internal Revenue Service. So we update this presentation with new rules and guidance as we become available. But for those of you who are working with small business owners, or you are yourself, you really have to consult your own CPA and your own attorney for the professional tax and legal advice as to how these programs are going to impact your specific business. Neither Janie nor I are either CPAs or attorneys. We're just trying to provide the sort of a conduit for this information as we do the research on it. So the whole purpose of these presentations is to assist small business owners, but also any of those of you who are also working with other small business owners, maybe supporting bilingual or underserved communities, and you can better help assist them with some of this information. One of the things that we've discovered that's the single biggest barrier to people being able to access these pandemic relief funds is a lack of financial literacy, a lack of understanding what a business entity is. You know, there are awful lot of people who we've learned who just haven't filed tax returns and or track financial profit and loss statements, and utilizing business bank account statements, and you know, proper payroll tax forms, W-2s, 941s, but also then tracking their transfers of funds through maybe an ACH or written checks, but also the state wage reporting documents for unemployment and labor and industries, the employer portions of health insurance, retirement plans, state and local taxes. Need to have receipts and canceled checks of all of this stuff if you're going to really be successful in dealing with pandemic relief programs, whether they be at the federal level or the Working Washington rounds 3 and 4. 3 was that we were involved in last year, as well as this coming up year. And so let's get started on the other programs that are there. The Shuttered Venue Operator Grant, and I don't know if that applies to any of you in your roles here, but that program went through weeks of building a portal, and then it got delayed, but it did open just as of this Monday. And as of yesterday afternoon, there were 17,356 total applications for this program nationwide, and of those, 9,472 have been started, and 7,884 were completed and submitted. So, that program is up and running now, and we've been teaching about how to use that program for weeks. So those that are ready, I think the evidence is there that that it's going to be fairly popular for those to which that particular program applies. You can get the updated information at this website that I've got listed here, www.sba.gov/SVO grant. You can get the updated FAQ as well as an applicant user guide. I will tell you that between the FAQ, and I think there's a more updated version since April 8th. Actually, I should change that date. In fact, the most updated FAQ is the 23rd. I was studying that yesterday. But between the FAQ and the applicant user guide, there's over 100 pages to study. So you've got to be somebody who realizes that this is the program for you. It is a pretty complicated process. It does require SAM registration to get something called a cage code. So those people to whom that applies, we can provide additional information if you still need some assistance with that, but it's a program that's up and running now. And most of those that view themselves as eligible are working on applications at this point. The Targeted EIDL Advance, this is one that really is focused on the many underserved rural communities, low-income communities. It does require, the key here is that the SBA is sending emails to those, and there's 4 things that determine your ability to qualify for this. One is being located in this low-income community is defined in section 45D, subsection E of the ARS code. At the bottom of this slide, there's a policy, a low-income mapping tool. That's the policy map that you can go to determine if any particular area in your community fits into that. You do have to demonstrate a 30% reduction in revenue during an 8-week period after March 8th. You have to have applied for the EIDL advance prior to December 27th. And that's the EIDL loan also, and then the EIDL advance prior to December 27th, 2020. And you have to have 300 or fewer employees. They did send, there isn't any place where you can apply, and we got this question even just yesterday. There isn't a place where you can apply for this independently. You have to be responding to one of the SBA emails for those that were already on record in the EIDL Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And so they sent out a first set of those who received a partial advance prior to July 11th, 2020. And then a second priority went out to those who did not receive any EIDL advance last year, but had applied for the EIDL loan. There is a supplemental, I know it's pretty complicated, but one of the things that's additional that they've just created is now a supplemental targeted advance that adds an additional $5,000 to those who are hardest hit. And that's defined by those who had a 50% reduction in revenue during that 8-week period and are in this low income area and have 10 or fewer employees. So they've added an additional $5,000 to those. Also, they originally had said that there was not, if you made a mistake, there wasn't going to be an opportunity for a reevaluation. But now if you've made a mistake just on the documentation, you got your bank account number wrong or some other thing. So for documentation mistakes, they do have a new email, a targeted advanced reevaluation at sba.gov that you can utilize. So if you've got anybody that you know of who's been involved in this and may need some additional help, we'll show you how to reach out to us on this. I will say that once somebody receives this SBA email on this, then you've got to actually complete a 23-page application to actually get this, either some portion of the 10,000 or all the way up to 15,000 if you're one of those in the most hardest hit. So there were some changes made on the federal PPP. So I just want to share with you what some of those are. The program was extended to May 31st, but there were some lenders that stopped accepting applications and stopped being involved in the program in March. There is an updated local lender list at this website right here, which is a key one that's been put together to really help recovery of small businesses at smallbizhelpwa.com. We want to stress that. We'll describe it again here at the end, but those who need some additional help with, if you haven't applied for this yet, and there's certain people who are now eligible and should have applied. But one of the things that they changed right around March 5th was the ability to utilize the gross amount for those who are sole proprietors and independent contractor types. And there's certain forms that are now utilized for the PPP application. We're not going to go into those today, but they are available if you need them. Allow you to utilize the gross amount from line 7 of your Schedule C rather than the net amount from line 31. However, this was not retroactive prior to March 5th, and there are quite a few people who applied who were sole proprietors who applied prior to March 5th. They're not making it retroactive, and our latest information is that Congress is not going to make it retroactive because Congress is the one that has to change that. They've moved on to other legislation. It's unfortunate. We're sorry about that, but it looks like that's the way Congress is going at this point. There was a restriction for small business owners who had any fraud conviction. For the most part, that has been lifted now, unless you have a fraud conviction. So those with fraud convictions cannot utilize the PPP, and there are various types of fraud convictions, but for most all others, unless you're currently incarcerated, you can now, with that, not be penalized just because you maybe had a felony years ago. So those people can apply, but that provision is not retroactive before March 5th. There was a restriction on access for those that had defaulted on a federal student loan or were delinquent on it. Those created a hold and error code that Janie's going to talk about here in a couple slides. But the hold and error code on those has been removed, and those people who did or do have federal student loan debt or delinquencies can now apply for a PPP, and that provision is retroactive prior to March 5th. And those who are non-citizen owners but who are lawful U.S. residents operating a business in the U.S. Are now allowed, by clarifying that they may use their individual taxpayer identification number, similar to a Social Security. It's called an ITIN, to apply for the PPP. And this is something that has 9 digits and begins with the number 9. But this provision was not retroactive prior to March 5th. One of the things that we can tell you is that many lenders, if not most, were really having trouble understanding how to apply this in their systems, and were reluctant to do so. And after this ruling came out on March 5th, people with ITINs were still having trouble, and I think even up till recently been having trouble. But the SBA has provided additional guidance to the lenders to encourage those to complete processing of those that may have been held up, but tried to apply with these ITIN numbers. So the PPP can be used now for additional funds, and that's for those that got either a first draw or a second draw in 2021. So it can be used for certain operational expenses, for business software and cloud computing, for things like human resource and accounting systems, but also product and service delivery costs, supplier costs, such as cost of goods sold that are relative to a contract for those, personal protective equipment. If there was property damage caused by civil unrest, particularly in 2020, those are now an allowed PPP expense. And they've expanded for 2021 what can be included in the insurance programs to include life and disability, as well as health, vision, and or dental. Loans made on or before on or after the enactment of the December 27th legislation can use these expanded forgiveness unless the loan has already been forgiven. For those, though, that had a 2020 PPP, you had to use all the funds by the end of December of 2020, when this was this provision about the additional uses was not in effect. So you probably, if you had a 2020 PPP, your best bet is to apply for loan forgiveness utilizing just the original items, which were payroll, mortgage interest, utilities, and rent. And so that really are the things that a 2020 PPP, if you haven't yet applied for loan forgiveness, the funds should have been used by the end of December for those three or four things. But for 2021, you have this expanded use.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I see you've expanded they've expanded the type of expenses. Are we still at the 60-40 ratio?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. The one way that you will not get full loan forgiveness is if you use less than 60% for payroll. So that's an absolute for every PPP loan, whether first draw or second draw. So thank you for bringing that up. There was prior to the end of December, the December 27th legislation, the Economic Aid Act, the idle advance was going to reduce loan forgiveness, and expenses that were forgiven were not going to be deductible on follow-up tax returns. Both of those issues have been resolved, have been repealed, so they are no longer relevant relative to getting loan forgiveness. That's a good thing. So I'm going to cover this importance of accuracy and then turn it over to Janie, and she can fill in anything additionally that she remembers that I missed here. But you do want to stay in touch with your first draw lender before you get a second draw. And many of you may already be in the middle of this process, but there is this issue of hold and error codes that is still an issue that's been holding up people either A, getting loan forgiveness on their first draw or being able to apply for a second draw. If that's the case and you've got these hold codes, I'm still getting emails from clients about this. You have to resolve the hold and error code with the first draw lender before you go and get a second draw, either with that lender or with a different lender. They got instructions on this in early February. But the single biggest issue by far is this mismatch of the tax identification numbers, or the business names, or the names of the owners don't match. A NAICS code, which is the North American Industry Classification System, doesn't match. And public records don't show business activity before February 15th. Those are the things that are holding up things. So you have to correct the first draw hold with your first lender before a second draw can be approved with any lender. All right, Janie, I've not covered everything, but there may be some things you want to add, but I'm going to turn it over to you and let you pick up from here.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Great job as always. Thank you for having us here this morning, Stacy, and we're going to kind of get through the rest of this. So I'm going to cover a little brief summary about why your PPP loan may be held up or declined by your lender. There are different codes that can come up. There are hold codes and error codes. The hold codes are generated by the SBA, and those must be cleared by the SBA before the loan can be authorized. Error codes basically can be cleared by your lender, and those types of things are related to potential information about bankruptcies or business formation. Some of them have come up where an owner, one or more owners, is deceased, and the business may be with an estate and going through some reorganization. Other things that the lenders can clear up are tax identification number errors, such as Social Security number or employer identification number mismatch. And we're seeing many errors that are cropping up as a result of the first lender putting in an inaccurate tax identification number for the borrower. And it could be as simple as using a Social Security number, but putting it in the configuration of an employer identification number. So a lot of these things are easily resolved and can get us through the process quickly, but we really want to make sure that you're working with your lender for the lender to get any and all information that's causing a hold or an error code back in the system correctly. And if you are using a different second draw lender from your first draw lender, you may have to go back to your first draw lender to have some of the input errors corrected. Next slide, please. So there has been a significant change in terms of the tax deductibility and tax reporting of the PPP loans. So first of all, when you're doing your reporting for 2020, the PPP loan, whether it was forgiven or not, does not need to be reported as part of your gross taxable income. There was a little bit of confusion last year regarding the allowance of the tax deductibility of expenses that were paid by the PPP loan as of the two acts that recently passed. They're basically all of your expenses that were paid by your PPP loan proceeds are now tax deductible. Okay. The other thing I just want to point out is please work with your CPA to make sure any other grant assistance or any kind of relief that you received gets the proper tax treatment. For the state of Washington, we were told that the PPP forgiveness amount is not going to be reportable as taxable. All right. So again, work with your CPA, your accountant, to make sure that your taxable income is reported properly at the federal and state level. Next slide, please. So the steps for applying for forgiveness really start with you going back to the lender who you had with the loan origination. So your lender will give you direction as to whether or not they want a paper form or if it's an online process through a portal. What we're really encouraging you to do is to compile all the information regarding your use of proceeds and the documentation related to that. And then you can check on the SBA website for the 3 forgiveness forms to make a determination ahead of when you submit it to your lender to make sure that you're using the correct forgiveness form for your circumstances. Okay. And the other thing I do want to just convey here, because this is a little confusing, is that you do have 10 months after the end of your covered period to submit your application for forgiveness. If you have not submitted your application for forgiveness within at least 10 months of the end of your covered period, your lender will have an expectation that you'll start making the scheduled monthly payments per your loan documents. Okay, so loan forgiveness applications can be submitted to the lender when three things have happened. One, you've used all of the funds, you have the capability of documenting the use of the proceeds, and your lender is ready to accept your application. And some lenders, because they're still in the throes of accepting PPP applications for 2021, have deferred a little bit on the acceptance of the forgiveness applications. But that will become robust because several borrowers at this point are, at or getting close to their 10-month period after the end of their covered period. Next slide, please. So which form to use? There are three forms. The 3508S form is the easiest of all. That is limited to loans of $150,000 or less. So again, it is a very simple form. It's a one-page document. There is a second page for optional demographic data that we really would like you to fill out if possible, but it is optional. We use that information solely to do reporting back to Congress as to the ownership of the businesses receiving these PPP funds. The next form is a 3508EZ form. This is for loans that are more than $150,000. Again, it's a fairly simple document, but it helps the borrowers that have the loans that are more than $150,000 have an easier process for completing their forgiveness request. So again, a two-page document, and it does include that optional demographic data. The longest form is the 3508. And it is actually 4 pages. There's a lot more work for that one. And the difference between the easy and the long form essentially comes down to this. With the easy form, on the first page of the instruction document, you're making a decision as to your ability to use that form. And the decision criteria really is related to two things. One is, did you compensate your employees at least 75% of their pre-COVID wage? And did you maintain their full-time equivalency status in terms of the number of hours? If you can answer yes to both of those statements, you can use the easy form. The other option is, again, related to maintaining the compensation at least 75% of pre-COVID wage. And the other question has to do with if your business was impacted by the guidance from the 3 federal agencies of Health and Human Services, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and OSHA, or if your business was impacted by the guidance provided by Governor Inslee. If that's the case and it impacted your FTE, then you get a safe harbor and you can use the easy form. For anyone else who did not compensate all of their employees at least 75% of their pre-COVID wage, or they had an actual reduction not caused by the guidance issued by the 3 federal agencies or Governor Inslee, they do have to complete the 3508 long form. And it's a very much more time-intensive document. And the SBA did try and make it as easy as possible, but it is a little bit of an exercise. So just keep that in mind. Next slide, please. Okay, so I got ahead of myself a little bit. So the 3508S form, again, loans 150 or less. The one thing I do want to point out is that if you have a loan amount of $50,000 or less, you do not need to comply with the wage requirement nor with the FTE. All right. If you have a loan above $50,000 and up to $150,000 and you're using this form, you are potentially going to need to complete the 3508 form for a calculation to make sure that you're requesting the accurate dollar amount for your forgiveness. So again, when your loan amount is more than 50,000 or up to 150, and you did not comply with providing the compensation at least 75% of pre-COVID wage, and or you did not maintain your FTE, you will need to use the 3508 form as a worksheet to help you get to the actual amount of your forgivable PPP loan. All right. So the other thing I just want to point out is there is a little box on all of these forms that indicates if your loan amount is $2 million or more, you need to check it. If your loan amount is not that high relative to affiliates and just your direct loan, please do not check that box, because it will put you into potentially having to be audited and additional work on your part. So just make sure you're going through the document and doing it accurately, and save yourself some stress. Okay, next slide, please. So now moving along to the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, what I do want you to know is that the portal will be opening on May 3rd at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. People who are going to apply for that program can set up an account as early as this Friday, starting at 6 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So it will enable you to put in information about your business and get through that initial process. But the actual portal and the application process does not start until Monday, May 3rd at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So we're really looking forward to getting that one going and open for anyone who is eligible for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Next slide, please. A brief overview on the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The program now has an expiration date through December 31st, 2021, or until the funds are fully utilized. It is a great program for long-term working capital availability for businesses that are undergoing duress during this COVID-19 period. The highlights of the program are that both for-profit and nonprofit businesses are eligible. The for-profits will have an interest rate of 3.75 fixed for the life of the loan. Nonprofit businesses will have a 2.75 fixed rate for the life of the loan. These loans are 30 years. All loans, regardless of whether you obtained an EIDL last year or this year, now have a 24-month deferment period, and which means that you're not making payments for 24 months from the date of the origination of the loan. The other thing that changed recently, beginning April 6th, was that these loans now have a maximum loan amount of $500,000. The SBA was sending emails out to businesses that had a loan from last year that were capped out at the $150,000 limit, to enable people to understand that they now can apply for an increase in their existing loan up to that $500,000 maximum loan amount. So we put the link for the application process in this slide deck. And what I just want to remind you, as with all of these products, is that accuracy is really key. And if you have not applied for an EIDL, but you're interested in it, then what I want you to do is make sure when you're putting the information in about your account number, that you make sure you're using the correct routing number, because some institutions actually have a different 9-digit routing number for electronic transactions as compared to the 9-digit routing number on your check. So please make sure that that information is correct. If you do have any questions on the program, we have the 800 number in the slide deck. If you were denied for an EIDL in the past, you can ask for a reconsideration. You just need to send an email to pdcrecons@sba.gov. What I would encourage you to do there is put in your application number and that you're applying for a reconsideration, include updated financial information, company prepared profit and loss statement is fine for 2020. Tax returns for 2019. We've also indicated in the slide that would probably be a good idea to include an SBA form 3501, a statement of liabilities, and an updated 4506T form. All of these forms are available on the SBA website. Again, accuracy is key. This is a repayable loan. It was not designed for forgiveness. But when you think about the fact that a working capital loan under the current SBA regular program would have a starting interest rate of 6% and interest rate adjustments potentially on a quarterly basis and only a 10-year maturity, this is a very good long-term product for you. Next slide, please. Steve, we don't have a slide in there on the targeted EIDL, right? Am I correct?
I think I covered that in the beginning. I mean,
okay, sorry, all right, thank you. Okay, here's some resources to get additional technical assistance. And we have many resources for having English, non-English speakers, English as a second language, throughout the state, especially including the underserved communities. So you can go to the State of Washington Department of Commerce link here to get assistance. And they do have several different languages there. I did take a look at that. And there are quite a few resources. So it's a good place to start. The other place you can go to is the website smallbizhelpwa.com. That is a list of technical assistance providers throughout the state of Washington, and it provides information about English as a second language providers, as well as lenders who are still doing the PPP loans. In addition, we have the SBA resource technical assistance providers, including SCORE, which is a Senior Corps of Retired Executives, the Women's Business Centers, and the Veterans Business Outreach Centers, as well as the Washington Small Business Development Centers, where Steve is from. The other thing I do want to let you know is that the SBA.gov website is convertible to 108 languages other than English. So all you need to do is hit the little translate button on the upper right-hand corner, and the entire website will convert over to the language you selected. For some of the application documents, however, they are not translated into all 108 languages, but we're trying really hard. We have ranging from 7 to 17 languages for the application documents for the various programs that are also accessible on the SBA.gov website. And then if you're specifically looking about how to calculate PPP loan amounts for the first draw and the second draw, we do have links to the documents to help you do the correct calculations. Next slide, please. If you're ever looking for a lender, then we do have Lender Match, which is on the SBA website. You can put a little bit of information in there about your business, and then hit the send button, and lenders nationally will contact you if they have an interest in helping you fund your program. The other places you can get information about the PPP program and the rules is the U.S. Treasury website. And the other place we recommend you go to for information about the employee retention tax credit is on the IRS.gov website. They just published a 100+ page document updating that program. I'm going to skip the City of Seattle one, but they do have some support there if you're in the city. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give this back to Steve.
Thanks, Janie. Good coverage. I realized that we didn't really fully introduce ourselves. in the beginning. But I'm with, as Janie mentioned, a group called the Washington Small Business Development Centers. We are a resource partner to the SBA. We have a pretty big footprint throughout Washington, including an advisor in Vancouver, Jerry Petrick. I don't know if any of you have connected with him, but he's been there for quite some time and is an excellent assistance for you. You can reach us at WSBDC.org, or one of the fastest ways to get to us is Washington at WSBDC.org or 833-492-7232. We've got 25 locations around the state and currently 34 certified business advisors available to assist people. There is an SBDC in Oregon too, that has a whole nother network throughout the state of Oregon. So plenty of resource for you if you want to get hung up any of these things. I did, there was one question about giving this slide deck. I will absolutely send this to Stacy so that she can distribute it to you. I will say though that what we've given you today is a really scaled down version of this. Janie and I actually work off of 2 separate 90-minute slide decks, 90-minute plus. One is the entire application program for the PPP that does include updates of the SBA programs. And then the second one is the whole loan forgiveness, where we actually cover the loan forgiveness information. So the address and number to the Longview branch, the fastest place to get that, I don't have it right in front of me. I can look it up for you, but the fastest place to get that would be at WSBDC.org. So, and Jerry Petrick, you'll actually get to see a picture of him as well. But with that, I want to have, I've explained myself, and Janie, why don't you
Sure.
talk about your and how to connect to the SBA.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. Well, as Stacy indicated, and I put in the chat, I do want you to be able to contact the SBA Portland District Office. Sam Goldstein is the Deputy District Director for the office, and I've included his number and the office number in the chat. Certainly, you can reach out to me, and you can always send me an email at janie.sacco@sba.gov. I'm happy to help you as well. I did in our slide deck, because we do this mainly for the Seattle district footprint, you have our phone number as well. But we're happy to help, and we're here to answer any questions you do have. And Steve, I did provide Stacy with the most recent slide decks, our 90-minute presentations for both the application process for a PPP loan, as well as the forgiveness process for a PPP loan. And I also included the most recent slide deck on the restaurant revitalization fund. So she has all 3 of the slide decks. And Stacy, what I would have you say, or just indicate here, is that Steve didn't update the PPP information for production in the slide deck. And the one that I sent you was not necessarily the most recent information for that, but all the other content was strong and good quality. So I guess I just want to end by saying, please reach out to us. We're here to support you. We want to support the small business community and make sure that you have every opportunity for success in the future. And that's really our mission. And just utilize the resources that you have. We're here to support you. So thank you very much, Stacy, for inviting us to do this presentation this morning. And we really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Janie. Thanks, Steve. That was a lot of information. I hope you guys are drinking coffee and taking notes. There's a pop quiz. No, not really. We just appreciate you guys being here and sharing. That's just a lot of information. And I guess the takeaway is you're not in this by yourself. The takeaway is there are a lot of people around you to help. And I would definitely be using somebody. If you're not using Jean, find a Jean clone to help you with your taxes. She seems to stay updated on all of the latest
Well,
and greatest.
I just wanted to make one comment, and you brought up just tangentially the employee retention credit, which is a very powerful thing for employers, and it does interact with the PPP in the forgiveness process. So you really want to work with, first of all, you want to find out if you're eligible for that as an employer, and second, you want to work with your taxpayer when you are doing your forgiveness, so you're not duplicating to those qualified wages in both places. But there's probably enough to go around. So that's all.
So find yourself
Thanks.
a pro.
Thanks for bringing that up, Jean. We usually do touch a little bit on the ERTC, but it's not
It's a
part of
thing. It's a thing of its own.
and it's really a function of the IRS, which the only update the IRS has provided on the details of that is an 107-page document that you can find on their website.
I have it on my shared drive. I know. So anyway,
They don't have a good FAQ on it, which is unfortunate. And
yeah,
it's not part of the Small Business Administration. So we only touch on
Right,
it tangentially,
right.
notice, but it's a good program and can save employers a lot of money, but you can't utilize it for the same payroll expenses as the PPP. So it's one of those things where working with a CPA like yourself, you can get a much better.
You can kind of strategize the best use of those qualified. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Are there any other questions before we're done?
All right, so we've got this recorded. Steve, I think you're still in control of the recording process, and he's going to get that over to me, and we'll put it up on our YouTube channel. And I will share the slide deck. I probably don't have room on our chamber chat to put all of the slide deck. So what I'll probably do is piece through it and grab the links, the ones that show the links to more information. But if you want me to email you the slide decks, please send me an email and I will get those over to you. So with that,